Welcome each of you today. Oh,
There you go.
is that better?
Yeah, there you go.
Today we're honoring 3 new members to the Johnston High School Hall of Fame. Tony Kendrick, Kyle Baker, and Roy Rogers. The Hall of Fame started in 2015. I was not a member of the Hall of Fame committee at that time. But after that first year, I was invited to be on the Hall of Fame committee. I gladly accepted because this is my hometown. This is my alma mater. Well, I have 2 other alma maters because I graduated from SIU in 1971 and DePaul University College of Law in 1974. This is my favorite alma mater. Proud of the other 2. This one's home. So I'm glad to be on the committee and to help in any way I could. The very first meeting I went to, Terry Milk said, we need somebody to do research. All of the records of prior teams, coaches, and players have either been lost or destroyed. I, being an old retired guy, having learned a little bit about doing research, genealogically, said I volunteered to do it. So over the last 10 years, I've been researching teams, coaches, players from the past. And having grown up in Johnston City, born here in 1949, lived here till 1974, and again until came back and stayed in 1986. I thought I knew everything about the history of this town and school. I didn't know squat. I found out. It's been a very interesting journey. What I found out is sometimes amazed me because I never heard the stories. I think in a town of 4,000 people, if your family lived here since 1913, you would have heard the stories, but I had not. So last year when I was here, I asked the crowd, what year do you believe Johnston High School started? Does anybody here know that year? I know Brian Jackson does, because I told him last year. Okay, it was 1904. Johnston City was formed in 1895, and in that year, the railroad came through this town. This town wasn't here then. It was Shake Rag, a couple of miles east of here. Chuck knows. He was here then, I think. The president of that railroad was a guy named B.F. Johnston. He went to a fellow named Duncan at a store in Shake Rag. Said, you people need to move about a mile and a half west. We're putting a railroad through. Duncan took his advice, moved his store where the railroad was going to be, and the other people followed. And he gave, the railroad gave Duncan the ability to name the town. So he named it Johnston City after the president of the railroad. Sidelight, in 1982, I met his grandson, Johnston's grandson, in Chicago Heights, played golf with him. His name was Gary Johnston. I told him, I'm from Johnston City. He said, that's my grandpa. It was an interesting meeting. I wouldn't have thought Gary was son of a president of a railroad, grandson of a railroad, but he was. So the high school opened in 1904. The reason being, they built it on Monroe Street, 1,000 block, 3-story school. First 2 stories were elementary and junior high. The The third floor was for the high school. There were 2 classrooms and an assembly room. It was a 3-year curriculum. So the very first graduating class was 1907. 2 students graduated. A guy named Aaron Bearden, he opened up a store, a hardware store, I believe in Johnston City. And a fellow named Floyd Henson Black, who left Johnston City after high school, went to Tennessee, graduated from a 4-year college in Tennessee, moved to Massachusetts, went to a seminary school in Amherst, Massachusetts, graduated from that. Then he went to Harvard. He got a postgraduate degree from Harvard University. From Johnston City, and you want to argue with somebody about the very first graduating class of their school against your school, you can say that you had 50% of the very first graduating class got a degree from Harvard. Not many towns can say that. So that was the school. It was a 3-year curriculum. It went on until 1911. And the school board said, you know, we need to have a 4-year curriculum. They changed it. I wouldn't like to have been in the class of 1911 because you didn't graduate that year. You had to stay another year, graduate in 1912. So there was no graduating class in 1911. Anyway, 1913 comes around, my family moves to Johnston City. My grandpa was a coal miner, was following the mines. Johnston City was booming in 1910 to 1920. Coal mines opening up all over. So my grandfather moved from Braidwood, Illinois to Centralia to Johnston City. He brought his 5 children and his pregnant wife. Bought a house on Newton Street. That's where the Wilsons lived till 10 years ago. In any event, my family has gone to school here, worked at the school here for 110 years, 12 years. 12 years now. Blake Zabrowski's my cousin. His kids are my cousin. My granddaughter is now teaching at Lincoln School, her first year of teaching. So my connections to this school and town go way back and they run deep. I love my hometown and I love my alma mater. And that's why I said I'll do the research. Having done it over the last 10 years, I've found stories that amaze me, stories I couldn't believe I hadn't read them myself. It shows you the whole American experience. Those lines were moving in the 19-teens. People came from all over this country to work here. My family was one. My mother's family was another. They came in 1990. Grandpa Smith was a coal miner also. Both my grandfathers were killed in the coal mines. One in 27 and one in 37. Never knew. Wish I had. My dad went to work in the coal mines in 1918 as a 15-year-old. Went to school after the 7th grade. Went to work in mines for $1 a day, 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. Saturday, he got $6, took it home, gave it to mom. He wanted something different from me. He became very interested in Johnston City. He served on the school board for 8 years, from 52 to 60. He served on the city council from 1954 to 1973. He believed in community service. So this is my community service. In doing research on these past athletes, teams, coaches, I used Ancestry.com, I used newspapers.com mostly. It's amazing what you can find out. I tracked down family members, 1936 players. Some of them wanted to talk to me, some of them didn't. I found the daughter of a guy who graduated in 1928. She said, yeah, that's my dad. I said, oh, good, you know, you participate, you know, I'd like to know more about him. She said, do you have any photos of him? I said, why? And she said, well, we had a flood at our house and all the photographs we had were gone. So I made copies of yearbook photos and newspaper clippings and sent them to her. She was very thankful. She lives in Long Island, New York. Found another daughter. Well, her dad and mom had got divorced. Dad had nothing to do with her after that. So she said, I have nothing to say. I don't want to talk to you. It was all kinds of stories that I got from these folks. Some good, some bad. In any event, 1904, they started the high school. The population of Johnston City in 1900 was 787 people. But they still started a high school in 1904. In 1910, the population was 3,248. 1920, 7,137. And it was estimated that in 1924 or 25, the population was somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 people. That's when the mines started closing in the Depression. And the population started declining. Does anybody know when other high schools doing this problem? This first opened. 1920, October. They built the high school because the population and the number of kids exploded. So the very first basketball team was 1920. Because the school didn't open until October, so there was no football. There'd never been basketball or football before that in high school. They had no place to play. Still didn't. So the very first football team was 1921. If you go to the library in Johnston City, they have the yearbooks from, I believe, every year since 1920. And a couple that were made prior to that, when it was called Growler. And it was a picture of a bulldog on the front of it. 1921, when the high school opened in 2021 school year. 21 yearbook says Cardinal. And it was that way for 20 years. It didn't change in the Indian head until like 1940 or 42. But they did call the team the Indians starting in 1929. If you go to the library, they have two large framed framings of photographs of the very first football team from 1921. Some of the members of that team were a guy named Marshall McMullen. He went on after high school to go to the University of Illinois, became a teacher and a principal, and that's what he did for a living. In the 1920 census, he was a coal miner. 1921, he was a student in high school. Another member of that team was a guy named Warren Pugh. He became an attorney and practiced law in Cardinal. Another member was Vincent Speranza, my dad's best friend. He called him Beansy. Vincent's brother Rocky was a maintenance man here at the high school in the 60s and 70s. You may have known him. The Speranza family lived over by the Buccaneers Club. There was another guy named John Jones. He was on the first football and basketball team. Ended up marrying my dad's younger sister, so he was my uncle by marriage. So though I did not know any of these people personally, I do have a connection to both of those teams. The very first season of football, first game was on September 30, 1921. Played Heron here. Heron won. We lost the game 19-12. The very first win was October 15th, 1921 against Cardinal. At Cardinal, we won 20-0. First year of football, their record was 4-5. The first undefeated football team was 1924, 6-0-3. They were the conference champions. And one player, a lineman his last name was Herman, was named All-State. What I can find, he was the very first All-State football player in Johnston City. first decade of football and basketball, things went pretty well actually by the end of the decade. Does anybody know who the very first state champion was? Johnston City, team or individual? I didn't, but his name was George Bundren. It was 1928. And he won the pole vault championship, Illinois State track championship. His father was president of the school board. You'll see his name on the plaques out there in the lobby. In 1929, basketball won the state championship. That brought a lot of notoriety and fame to the city of Johnston City. Because from 1929 to 1950, this was a basketball team. They went to the state tournament 6 times, won it in 29, finished 4th in 31, finished 3rd in 36, lost in the first round in 38, 49, and 50. I truly believe the 36 and 49 teams could have won had they won their semifinal game in the first game. The 36 team made it to the semifinals and lost to Decatur on the last second half-court shot. Decatur went on and won the tournament in the next game. 49 team drew Mount Vernon as their first opponent. They lost by 2 points. When a shot by Pete Truman, who's in the Hall of Fame, he made a shot from the foul line, and the referee disallowed it. I think they called it walking. My sister and father, who were at that game, disputed that call. Till the day my sister died, she disputed that call. She said it was wrong. But anyway, Mount Vernon went on and won the tournament easily after beating Johnston City. And Johnston City had beat them in the last game of the regular season, 30-29, here in Johnston City. And even though basketball was king at that time, there were still good football players and good football teams. 29, 30, and 31 teams were all undefeated. They went 22-0. In 1929, they outscored their opponents 295 to nothing. No team got more than 1 first down in any game against them. The 30 team outscored their opponents 235-13. I was told that 6 of those points came when the Johnston City player fumbled the ball in the end zone on the kickoff. The other team covered it. Of those players on that team, it was double digits that went on to college and played football, basketball, and track, or all of the above. And there were 3 players from that time. 2 of them went to the NFL. One of them could have gone. He was drafted by the Chicago Cardinals. He said he didn't want to play. One was Tony Blazine. He's in the Hall of Fame. I'd heard of Tony Blazine my whole life. Everybody knew him. Great football player. He's in the NCAA Football College Hall of Fame. But there was a second player named Tony Casket. He's also in the Hall of Fame. I'd never heard of him. The very first meeting I went to, Larry St. Stevens asked me, "Bill, who's Tony Casket?" I was like, "I don't know." He said, "I was looking at some records. He finished 3rd in pole vault in 1929 at the state tournament. That's all I know." But when I researched him, I found out he played football at Illinois Wesleyan, the same place that Tony was. And he was drafted in the NFL. And he was a running back for the Detroit Lions in 1935, and they won the championship. That amazed me because how could I live in Johnston City my whole life and not have heard of a guy that played on an NFL championship? But he did. The other was Dwight Hayfley. He went on to Washington University in St. Louis. And at that time, Washington University was in the Missouri Valley Conference. He could play on the varsity team as a freshman. So all 3 years after his freshman year, he played on the varsity football team, basketball team. He was on the track team all 4 years. And oh yeah, he was the heavyweight boxing champion of the Missouri Valley Conference 4 4 years in a row. In his senior year, he was a decathlon champion, the track and field championship in Missouri Valley Conference. In basketball, he was all-conference his junior and senior years. In football, he was all-conference all 3 years. He was honorable mention All-American in his senior year. He played in the college football all-star game against the Green Bay Packers when the college players won. There were many other players from that time that went on to play college football, including Raymond Hobbs, Arthur Yates, Ace Caduras, Anthony Donna, and others. Over the last 40 years, Johnston City's obviously become a football town. We've had some great players and great teams. I hope that this Hall of Fame will preserve all of those people, all of the teams, the coaches, because it's part of our history. And I want to congratulate the 3 gentlemen today who are going into the Hall of Fame. I know Tony for a long time. I've known Roy since grade school. We're the same age. I looked this morning, Roy, found my 3rd grade yearbook. You were in my class. Where's the heart?
Mrs. Bird told me I had to learn the Constitution. She said, I'll see you next year.
We've known each other a long time. He's a good guy. I don't know Kyle Baker, but he was one heck of a football player. I can say that. Anyway, I congratulate all 3 of you. And to introduce Tony Kendrick, is Coach Mike Root, who's also a member of the Hall of Fame in 2017. Coach Root.
You have to excuse me just a little bit if I'm reading off cards, because at 77, I was doing the morning service at church last Sunday, and I pulled out my paper, and I said, if they're in a 6-2 defense, we're going to run the buck sweep first play. And I thought, oh, that's the wrong paper, and I didn't have what I was supposed to do for church on Sunday morning. I will say this, before I get to Tony. First of all, I will not do justice to it. I know that. But before I get to him, because I had another appointment, I have to be somewhere, and I told him when he called me, I will definitely be here. And then something else came up, and I was not going to cancel out on this. I want to say this to Roy. When I got hired to coach here in 91, the first thing that Coach Truan did was bring me a box full of films. 16 millimeter, I think it was VHS tapes, I think. Now, I'd been at Marion for 9 years, and I started looking at those tapes, and I thought, who in the world is making these game tapes? And it was Roy Rogers. And for 16 years, he made the game tapes for me. I want to say, Roy, don't make them so damn good, because every time I got to swap them with another school, they're getting to see like a movie theater picture. And I'm getting these little bitty films, I can't see the numbers on the players. You were unbelievable, Roy. And then later on, when I couldn't find some tapes that I wanted to go back to an offense we ran for a couple of years, I come to Roy, made me copies. I appreciate everything he did for him for 16 years. Now, again, before I get to Tony, I'm sure his teammate is going to give a great talk about Kyle Baker. I want to say this. There's never been another player in the state of Illinois in a state playoff game that has ever run for 2, passed for 1, caught 1, and ran an interception back. Never in any playoff game in the history of the state playoffs, which started in 74. So if you were there that afternoon, a little bit better of coaching. I ran into Richard Baker last week, one of my all-time favorites also. And he always reminds me of the story. Baker intercepts the pass, right, Doug? 2 minutes to go in the game, and I go out there and I say, look, you get a first down, we're going to beat Mount Carmel. Probably would have been the biggest win in my career. And we don't get the first down. And they beat us in the last 32 seconds. So I wish Kyle were here. I'd tell him how much I appreciate everything he did for me. Now I want to talk about Tony. First of all, it's truly an honor to introduce Tony Kendrick for a particular reason. And I don't want to get emotional. He played for one of the finest coaches in our state, Ross Babington. And I think a lot of qualities that Tony Kendrick took out of those 4 years with Ross Babington is what made him the man that he is. Because Ross Babington was a special person. So I wanted to say that, okay? We both wish Ross was here and he was introducing you today, Tony. To me, this honor is long overdue. Long overdue. And I wrote this down because I didn't know these guys were going to be here. I always tell my players, and I've done it for 56 years, you give me 5 outstanding offensive linemen and average backs, and I'm going to win. You give me excellent running backs and poor offensive linemen, I'll probably go 500. Your senior year, you had a combination of the two. Had outstanding running backs and outstanding offensive teammates in the offensive line. And I know you've told me numerous times they helped made you what you were. I will tell you this about that group. All spring and all summer. Now you got to understand, I'm in a high school of 1,300 students. This high school's got what, 450? And they got to play me. And they didn't back down from anybody. They played whoever was on their schedule. But I watched them in track. Went to state the 400-meter relay team, right? Eisenhower, Hush, Kendrick, and Rametta. I thought, boy, this could be a handful. And if I go back and watch the old film, it's either you or Rametta. If somebody don't trip running the kickoff back up the middle, I might have got beat that night at Marion. I think your loss to us was the only loss, right? And you went into the Black Diamond and you just kicked butt, did you not? That's what I thought. So I think it's long overdue. I think the world of this young man for numerous reasons. One, if you don't know what a silver spooner is, who in here doesn't know what a silver spooner is? I've coached silver spooners 8 miles down the road, 6 miles down the road, okay? I'm not saying they weren't good football players. We had a great run there for 9 years, but Tony Kendrick was not a silver spooner. He did not. Nothing was ever given to him. I'm totally convinced, and this is from talking with Ross. Ross and I had a lot of talks when we were both principals here in this district. He earned everything he got. Nothing was ever given to him. He earned it, okay? He got by his hard work. I tried to recruit him to Marion. You know, I'm noted as a recruiter, right, Doug? I mean, you're looking at Han, or Jerry, Lawler, Piper. I mean, hey, I always said that I didn't recruit. The program recruited him, okay? So that's what I would have told the IHSA. Just because I stepped over Jerry's stepdad at the Assessor tournament for 3 days, I wasn't recruiting for Jerry, okay? Just happened to have the same seats, even though they're not numbered at Assessor, okay? But I always liked the fact he was not a silver spooner, and Ross said he earned everything he got, okay? He wasn't going to come and play for me at Marion because he's red and black. That's what it was.